Visualis3R is able to show you the different types of opacity of white ink or toner. Now it's very important because when you use white ink, it doesn't go down as 100% opaque, and this is a classic example that's being demonstrated by HB Indigo. So they refer to using more than one amount of ink as a hit. So basically, if you put one hit of ink down, that's one printing impression of the white ink. If you put the same impression down again, you get 2 hits of white ink, and then 3 hits of white ink, and 4. So you can stack the layers of the white up to make it more opaque. Now this means that you are obviously paying for more than one hit of ink, and as a 5-color digital device you may be having a white on your machine and you'd have to put it through potentially multiple times, and you can then start getting issues with registration if you put too much down. Typically it's being handled very well these days with digital devices. The registrations are very tight and it should be all right, and some devices have the ability to increase the density with a slider based approach rather than actually putting it through multiple times on the press. So you need to speak with the print service provider on how they actually print and what their white ink looks like. And you could give them a test file, do something simple as this, 1, 2, 3, 4 hits of white, and ask for a printed sample. And then that way as a designer you know that sweet spot. So is 2 hits of white good enough for you? And it's not just about using white on its own, it's using white to underpin colour as well. So when you're printing onto coloured stocks, it might be like this black example here, or it might be red material. It's really important because if you're not blocking out the full colour from behind, for example, if you've got black and it's coming through, you can see here you've got that greyness. So any colour that you put over the top of that white is also going to inherit that greyness as well. So what we're going to demonstrate is how we would recommend designing with white ink. So we've created this layout here, and the thing to remember is that white can be used in 2 different ways. Vector graphic as a solid white, so we're going to use a solid white on these t-shirts at the top using 1, 2, 3 and 4 hits of white. And then we have photographic t-shirts. Now we are going to use the same white 100% behind the back of the t-shirts, but just to show you how the tonality works. So if you've got tone in your graphics, that's going to inherit the grayness of the material through the back if you only have 1 hit of white ink. So we've created some fun t-shirt slogans. So the first one, 50 shades of white, because white can come in so many different ranges and opacity. 2 hits of white, not quite white, but getting there. 3 hits of white, hit me baby one more time, and we will get everything will be all white. So we like to have a little bit of fun, make it a little bit interesting, and we're also going to explain why your whites look grey. And then one thing that people don't talk about is hits versus repetition. So I'll explain that when we get into the Visualis3R software. So basically we need to understand how do we design. Now this is going to be printed onto a black substrate. So when you're designing, you don't design the black substrate because you're not printing the substrate is the base material. Now you can put in a non-printing background, so switch off the print box here and it won't print, and you could put in a black design. Now when you're working with a photographic image like this, we're going to clearly see it looking correct, but if we print it, it's not going to come out like that. We have to have a white ink backing behind the back. So Illustrator shows you it wrong, because the only way you could get this to work would be to start making the boxes start to multiply the background, in which case that's kind of what you'd get when you print it out. And obviously you don't want to start messing with your file, setting things to overprint when you don't need to. So it's misleading when you design. Now the other complexity is that you also have to take into account that you can't see white ink as a spot color when it overprints on your screen. And I'm going to demonstrate that now. So to start this off, we're going to actually just use a new spot color. So let's just go spot color 5. And the only reason I'm doing this is that I've already set my artwork up with 4 separate spot colors. Now you wouldn't do this yourself. This is a big stress point here. You only design 1 white separation, but I'm trying to simulate 4 different types of printing on one file. So I'm creating 4 different whites. So what you would normally do is you would create a spot color called white. Some documents don't let you do it because it basically might already have white in the name and it might be reserved, in which case you could call it spot white. And of course, if you are using the Touch 7, sorry, that's my other company, the Visualis3R spot color library, then just use the spot color names that's in our swatch palettes. Okay, so spot white, just for an example. So what we do is, let's just say we went down the mentality of saying, well, white is white, so let's call it white and we'll make it look white and everything will be all right. Well, it's not, because if I now take that spot white and I put it over my design, well, I can see it. But if I print that now, that box there is going to knock out my design. So you have to make it multiply or overprint so that you can see the element coming through behind. So let's just make that overprint. Well, what you would normally get, it doesn't do it because I've already got my settings switched off, you would get a warning first of all popping up saying you shouldn't do this, it'll go transparent. And it does, as you can see there. You cannot see white when you set it to multiply or overprint. It's just not there. So how you get around it? Well, what they recommend to do, and you look at companies like Ricoh and Fuji and Sharp and everybody else, they say create a spot white or a white spot color and color it up 100% cyan. So now when we do it, let's just first of all say again, you have to have it overprinting or multiplying, because otherwise your spot white is going to knock out anything below it. So we switch it on. Well, now my t-shirt's blue. It still looks really weird and random. So the simple basics of anything that you want white, you basically have to put a whiting, or if anything you want it to be as colour with the white behind it, you have to add a white layer. So a classic example, this text here, all I would do, you can do it either as two separate layers and just create a white over the top and set it to overprint, and that's it, you're done. You could also go and do it a little bit more elegantly. You can go into the layer that we're in here. I think I've already got one built into it. Let me just get rid of that one. So we'll go into this graphic here. We can do using the appearance box. And this is, if you know Illustrator very well, you'll know it's window menu, go to appearance. And the appearance will literally tell you the appearance of what that file is. In this case, we're telling us that it's a gradient. And we can see down here the gradient blend. Now if I want to put white on there, I can do a new fill layer, I can go to my spot white and I can set it to overprint. And now it's nested within inside that same graphic, so I can then move it around. So that's all there is to it. It's basically very easy. Wherever you want white, create a spot color called white or spot white and make it cyan and make it multiply over your design. So let's turn off the black background. Let's go back to what it looks like. Let's switch on my spot colors that I've already set up. So your file would end up looking like this. And of course, let's just put that white back over the top of there. So, like I said, I'm simulating 4 different types of printing processes. So you wouldn't have it all looking like this. You would literally just have it looking like this number 4 on the end. So let's now take that and make a PDF file. Now, when we're working with different types of transparency and everything else like that, opacity, multiply, Adobe transparency settings, we do recommend that the PDF format that you use is PDFX1, because that will basically flatten everything down nicely. So PDFX1, and it will make a lovely PDF for you. So we're then going to go into the software and see what that looks like. So let's go into the Visualis3R software now. Okay, so let's select a PDF file. We'll go to that t-shirt file that we just created. So this is now ripping the file. It's ripping it into TIFF format, so you're no longer in vector. And then it's going to render that as each separate layer, CMYK, plus those spot colors. Now I'm going to get more spot colors than you would. You would only see one spot color called white or spot white or whatever it's called. But I am going to show you how it all looks. Now, first of all, the background here is on a, the substrate controls is on a white paper. Now, obviously, we're going to put in some material. So one thing you could do, you could take something like the NIX Mini 3. If you don't know about it, go and look up NIX, N-I-X Mini 3 color sensor. They're about $100, and it's an LED-based device that can measure color. So if you have a particular substrate and you want to put the color value in, you can do so. So what we're going to do here, we're going to say, well, it's going to be an uncoated. Uncoated has slight ink absorption. And we're going to go to the color box and we're going to put in either the RGB value or a hex value. In this case, I'm just going to put in the RGB value for the color that I've measured, which is 63, 62, 61. It's like an off gray, blackish kind of color. So I now have some materials in there. Now, obviously, you can set your substrate up however you like. So you can see here, let me just switch off my white, that if you do not have a white color or a white ink in there, then you are printing on top of the grey material. Now let's just also change the environmental from a dark grey to a white so it looks a bit easier on the screen. So we have our greyish material, we have our designs printed over the top, and without white it looks awful. So what we can do is we can set those white inks up. So 1, 2, 3, and 4. So let's start out at the top. Vector graphics, 1 hit of white, 2 hits of white, 3 hits of white, 4 hits of white, and they all at the moment look the same because it's all been treated as 100% opaque. But as we saw in that visual from HP Indigo with their electro white ink, you don't get that. So 1 hit of ink, we can simulate this. So I'm going to go into these ink separations. So we have an opacity slider. So 4, we're going to leave it at 100% because that's the real white. Now let's go to number 3. I'm just going to do this visually. Obviously you would match it to a physical printed sample. I don't obviously have a physical printed sample because I only have the internet-based Photoshop that somebody had taken. So I'm just going to basically assume it's like 90, 80, 70 kind of effect. And where do we have 100, 90, 80, so this should be 70. So visually, just to kind of simulate what it would look like. So you can simulate the different effects of the opacity based on 1, 2, 3, 4 hits of white. And what you can do here is you can go into your presets. So like on 1 hit of white, I could do 1 hit, oops, 1 hit white. Can't spell today. And I can save that as a preset. So if I bring a file in again and it loads in at 100%, I can go in and go, oh, 1 hit of white, and it will set the file up for you. So now we can simulate it, and it's important because if you look at how that works with color, not just vector graphics, but the shading changes. So, you know, you've got gray shadows here with the gray coming through from the background because the white's not fully opaque. And that will affect even when you put color. So I'm trying to keep it simplified here, just using this kind of black and white type look. But if you put a colored image over the top of a gray background, the gray background comes through, so you have to put a white. And it's that sweet spot. So usually you probably find around 3 hits of white. And in fact, most press devices would recommend 3 hits, you know, digital engines, HP Indigo. Now, just to add to confusion, HP Indigo also has a new premium white. Now, their premium white is about twice as white as their standard white. So, for example, if you used 1 hit of white on your press and get with the Pro, you're probably going to get this like 2 hits of white version effect. So again, you've got to get the sample from your print service provider, visually look at it, match it with your slider. What you can also do, if you're always going to print with, let's just say you're always going to print with 3 hits of white, in your presets down here, you can say save as default. And that means that every time your file loads up, it'll always load at your correct opacity. So it will basically override the defaults. The whole point of the software is it gives you the power to control the software. So you can set it up, you can override factory defaults, you can make it work the way you work and how your press works. Now, finally, let's talk about hits versus repetition. And this is very, very important. And it's something that most people will not educate you on because they're probably unaware of it. But when you work on devices like the HP Indigo, they have what they call hit or repetition. So a hit basically targets like the top 90% of the separation. So looking at this grayscale slider here, well, the white scale slider that I've added in here, if you were to do multiple hits, then only like the 90% to the 100% is actually increased, meaning that all the tonal region in here is left as it is. So your solids might go more white, but all this tone will still look washed out. Repetition means it takes the exact same printing plate or separation and repeats it over and over again, which means that all this lot will scale up. So when you have, you know, the 2 hits of white, so let me just demonstrate this on this one down here. Yeah. So if I was to demonstrate this here, you can see here at say, you know, 1 hit of white, I've got a certain level. Now if I boost that up, because if I use repetition, all of this scales up. Whereas if you didn't use repetition, only this top part would go more opaque and all of this would still look washed out. And that is really important when you're printing with tone inside an image and you're putting white behind the back of things. And it's the same for all other color separations as well, not just white. If you're printing with silver, it does the same thing, silver toner. Now, whether that's the same on a lot of the digital engines, you would need to find out from your service provider. Normally, they should be using repetition, but it's more likely a unique feature of HP Indigo. But obviously, we've worked with HP Indigo in the past. We've been with them with the demo centers and testing files out and everything over the years over in Barcelona. And we've learned all these different skills about how the inks and how everything works. So that is the quick kind of overview of how white works. Not all white is equal. You've got to find out what it looks like. The opacity is different, and then there's that hit versus repetition. So there we go. That is how you work with Visualis3R to simulate the white ink or toner on your press using either 1, 2, 3 or 4 hits of white. Now you can obviously put more hits of white down if you want. Some people, like on the HB Indigo, can put anything up to like 15, 16, 17 hits of white. And by doing that, you raise the density, the depth of the white and create like a braille effect. So anyway, if you have any questions on how this works, please drop us a line at hello@v3r.studio, and don't forget, contact your print service providers for examples of their white ink printing, silver, foiling, varnishing, or whatever services they provide, and then put that into the V3R software. And just a quick reminder as well, if you do save a preset, like for example, maybe I'm a printer and I've decided that this particular white of mine looks like 78%, I could save a preset, but I could also then set that preset and export it and give it to my designer. So I can say, use this, this is our white with 2 hits, and then you can set the file up. So you can communicate from Visualis3R software between the printer, the designer and the brand, so you're all using the same settings based on that printer. Okay, so there we go. A great way to be able to work with the Visualis3R software and white ink or toner simulation.